Good morning and welcome to Epsom Vineyard. We're Duncan and Lorna. We have the absolute privilege of leading this lovely church family.
So if you're new, we would love to hear from you. You can drop us an email, hello@epsomvineyard.org, or you can message us through Facebook or Instagram. We'd love to connect with you and maybe meet up with you, go for a walk, grab a coffee, something like that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Quick heads up, we've got Car Park Church again next week. We loved it last week, so we're going to do that again, weather dependent, of course. Tonight, if your youth haven't signed up yet for our Frisbee evening, please do. Just a little bit excited about that. And we've got a Zoom after church today with a couple of special guests. Lawrence, do you want to tell us about that?
So we've got Mary and Simon. You'll probably know Mary and Simon. They're part of our church, but they are two of our trustees, and they will be available on our Zoom call for questions. So they're going to share with us first, along with Brian, who's our other trustee. Our trustees are brilliant people. They've just got a wealth of experience across their careers that they share with Epsom Vineyard. So the role of the trustees is to guide and to bring their wisdom based on their experience, particularly in matters of finance and legal care of the church community. You know, in simple terms, we, the senior pastors, will define what we're going to do and cast the vision, and the trustees will ask, well, what are the problems? What are the pitfalls? Are there any other options open to us? Largely, our trustees provide us with a great system of accountability. We're so grateful for them.
We are.
John Wimber, who was one of the founders of the Vineyard movement, once said of trustees, it's the trustees' job to keep the church and its leaders out of the red, so that's the financial oversight, out of the courts, so that's the legal oversight, and out of the papers, and that's the moral oversight. It's a legal role to have as a charity. We have to have trustees. And based on all of that, we asked Simon, Mary and Brian to be our trustees before we planted Epsom Vineyard, based on them being godly, having godly character. They are committed to seeing Epsom Vineyard flourish. They really are. And they have expertise in business and handling finance as well. And they support the church with discretion and confidentiality where needed. It's all a voluntary role. They do that all in their spare time. So we are so grateful for them and to them.
They're also our employers. So if you ever have an issue with Lorna and I, obviously, not that you're going to, but if you do, please obviously come in touch with us first. That's biblical and sound wisdom. But if after you've spoken to us, you feel like you've still got questions or issues that we haven't helped you resolved, then our trustees are just your first people to go and speak to. They're good people. They help us run the church. And actually, let's hear from them now. Okay, we're going to let them introduce themselves next, but just so you get to know them a little bit better, Brian is our external trustee and a company secretary, which means that he keeps us as trustees accountable to the tasks that we each agree to complete. And for those of you who don't know him, Brian, along with his wife Julia, are at Sutton Vineyard, and he's one of the preaching team. So Brian, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much indeed, Dunk. And so I'm Brian Durran, and I'm privileged to have been invited by Duncan and Lorna some years ago to join them as a trustee, albeit an external trustee of Epsom Vineyard Church. And the external bit is because Julie and I, at the present time, remain committed to where we've been since 2003, members of Sutton Vineyard, where we have led the Alpha ministry for some time, and where I've been preaching in the preaching team since about 2010. So Duncan asked me just to say a few words about, why am I a trustee? I have served as the CEO of a charity which we set up around the year 2000. I was working in education, supporting schools with technology, and recognized the internet was a coming thing, and we needed to look at getting schools on broadband. While I worked for one London borough and got the schools on broadband, I recognized there was a big opportunity if we could just get all the boroughs in London to come together and become like a very big customer. And I had the privilege of getting the 33 boroughs to join the club and led the organisation until I retired 16 years later as I served as CEO, and principally got out of bed in the morning to keep 1 million children safe when they go online in school, as well as providing a lot of great learning resources. It's not a plug for Learn and Grid for Learning, but really having been working in the charity sector through those years, as well as being in the education sector, it's given me some understanding of the corporate governance of an organisation like this.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian. And of course, things like safeguarding are part of the role of trustees, just to make sure that we keep everybody safe in the church, anyone who would be vulnerable. So, Brian, thank you so much. You come with such wisdom, and we're very grateful to have you with us. Next, we're going to Mary. Mary, as many of you know, she plays keyboards in our worship band, but she brings a whole different set of skills as a trustee of Epsom Vineyard. She's our treasurer, makes sure all our finances are sound and that our annual charities report is correctly submitted. So, Mary, could you share with us a little bit about your work role and how does that help you as a trustee of Epsom Vineyard?
Yeah, sure. As most of you probably know, I run an accountancy practice with assistants, my son Matthew and my daughter Elizabeth. I specialise in the charitable sector, and I've got 33 charity clients, making up over 40% of my business. The clients present us with financial information on a variety of software applications, including Xero, which is what EVC uses, so that's very helpful. And for some clients, we do management accounts, budgets, bookkeeping, payroll, a bit of everything really. But for all of them, we prepare, examine, or audit statutory accounts and trustees' or directors' annual reports. So I'm familiar with all the accounting requirements of EVC and how to present them to our independent examiners and minimise their work. In the course of auditing, I have to be familiar with all sorts of legal matters, such as data protection, safeguarding that Duncan mentioned, money laundering, quality control, confidentiality, ethics, privacy, duties and responsibilities of trustees, employment law, contract law, to name just a few. I also attend trustees' meetings in an advisory capacity where matters such as risks and controls are monitored. As a professional auditor, I need to attend CPD courses relating to charities and other things. These are all very useful to me as a trustee of EVC, and I feel privileged to have been given this responsibility to serve the church.
Thank you, Mary. And we're privileged to have you with us too. Just obviously, one of the roles of a trustee is just making sure that Epsom Vineyard is safe financially. And Mary brings a whole load of skills to that as well. Thank you, Mary. We move on to Simon next. Simon served as a trustee of many vineyard churches previously, and he brings that level of experience with him as he serves as our chair of trustees. So, Simon, could you share a little bit about your work role and maybe even previously your work roles and how that helps you as a trustee of Epsom Vineyard?
Yeah, thanks, Duncan. So my current role in work is within product strategy and marketing within a large multinational organisation. So that gives me a lot of experience in long-term thinking, in leadership and management. And that's backed up by my previous job where I ran a small business as the managing director and one of the owners. And a lot of the issues that a small business and a vineyard church have are very, very similar. And they're quite similar organisations, and the sizes are not too different. Of course, these days we're all getting very good at Zoom, and I spend quite a few hours a day on video calls and a lot less time travelling. So that's very useful for this exercise as we're running all of our trustee meetings over Zoom these days, and of course a lot of all the other things we do. I think it's worth saying, for those who are not familiar with the vineyard setup, that each vineyard church is essentially a self-contained charity. And while there is guidance and support from the centre, it's the responsibility of individual trustees in each church to help the senior pastors in administration and finance using their skill and judgment. But it's also important for us to remember to balance our faith and business skills to choose the right way forward to help grow God's kingdom on earth. As the chair of trustees, one of my main jobs is to design and derive the agenda for our meetings and also to keep things moving along and to time so that our regular trustees meetings don't go on for hours and hours and hours, especially at the moment with the remote video calling that we're doing. Thank you.
Fantastic. Simon, thank you so much. And thank you again for all your input as a trustee.
Thanks, Duncan. So I'm going to spend a few minutes going through the accounts for last year. Don't worry, we've tried to make this as friendly and not too financial as possible, but clearly we are talking about money, so there will be some sort of pounds and pence in there. So I think the first thing to say about what we do is that we as a church, as a charity, submit accounts yearly. And the church year, the financial year, runs from the 1st of September to the 31st of August each year. The other thing to say is it takes some time to get accounts submitted and approved. We have to do this within a period of a few months, but the accounts have been submitted quite recently. And what I'll be talking about is the accounts that ended, if you like, for the financial period that ended on the 31st of August last year, so 2020. So other things to say is that, first of all, the good news is the church's income exceeded its expenditure. What I would say on that is we try and run the finances prudently, and so our aim is to make a small surplus of income over expenditure. Now, the first year the church operated, we benefited from a really very good first year of operation that gave us sufficient reserves. Why is that important? Because it allows us to provide stability. And it means if we have a good month or a bad month, it doesn't really make any difference to our plans. Many people know on their household income that if you're running very close to the edge when it comes to the end of the month, you might have to suddenly cut back on spending. We don't want to do that. We want to plan well, and having reserves allows us to do that. And you won't be surprised that, as for many organisations, the effect of COVID-19 affected our finances. The good news is that obviously, because we weren't allowed to meet, we spent less money on hiring places to meet, like Cento Coffee Shop and other places like your courthouse that we previously met. However, on the flip side of that, we spent more money on equipment to produce the virtual services. And I'm sure you'll agree that these are produced to an extremely high quality, and we regularly get praise from other churches who think we're a lot bigger than we actually are. So what we're presenting here in this PowerPoint, this presentation, is a summary. Just a quick summary of what we've been doing. So the full accounts are available to anybody, the general public, because that's part of the rules of being a charity, and they're available on the Charity Commission website. But to save you time looking around, if you email us, we'd be more than happy to send you a copy. And of course, answer any questions that you might have about the finances. We realise that it's not everybody's cup of tea, and so if you've got any questions, we'd be really happy to answer them. So moving on to the next slide, what I'm showing you here is a little bit of a pie chart showing the income for the year, which was about £44,000. Now, you can compare the year before and you think the income was slightly down, but actually in our first year, because it's the first year of setting up a charity, the financial year was actually 15 months long. So generally, our income has actually gone up on a monthly basis. You can see that the donations were around about 35,000, and we are really grateful to everybody for committing to do gift aid. As you can see, gift aid on our donations was nearly £8,500, and that's free money, if you like, for the charity that we get from the government based on the taxes that you pay. So that's really good. The flip side is with low interest rates, we didn't make an awful lot of money on our reserves. So the investment income, if you like, what we got was the grand total of £27. But as Tesco says, every little helps. Coming to our expenditure, the total was around about £38,000. So, £44,000 coming in, £38,000 coming out, around about 10% of more income over expenditure. And in my mind, that's sort of about the right level. So this year, we spent quite a bit more on different things with the church. Clearly, we spent money on gatherings. We spent money outside the church, you can see there. And we also spent money on things like the We Love Epsom, our community projects. As a charity, we have support costs. That includes employing Duncan and Lorna as our senior pastors. And so all of that taken together gives you a balance of where the money's spent. Now, if you want to look at the accounts and go down with a fine-tooth comb, as I said, we'd be very happy to tell you where everything is. What I should assure you is that as a charity, we have robust financial controls. That means that when there are large items of expenditure, the trustees get to oversee what those are. And Duncan and Lorna put together a budget which includes all of the costs which the trustees see and approve. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of where we are. As a sort of group of trustees, we make sure that we're operating in a prudent way. What I put together was a kind of list of frequently asked questions. This is not to save me time, but I think it is useful to kind of put this down on paper to see how things work. So the question might be is, how does the church budget? As I said, Duncan and Lorna work out a budget for our spiritual priorities. So I think it's really important to say that Duncan and Lorna, as the senior pastors, set the objectives and strategy for the church, the spiritual priorities. A trustee's job is to review it and provide feedback. We're not there to say whether money should be spent on doing X or Y. It's more to say, is that a good idea? Are we spending more than we should? Is this going to get us into trouble? So really the trustee's job, and this is really careful in terms of the partition, our job is to look over the budget and check it's okay. The spiritual direction is what the senior pastors do. Another question is, where did the money go to outside the church? So we do support Vineyard Churches UK in their work. In return, we get advice, guidance, and some legal and admin support. And that amount that we give to Vineyard Churches in the UK is around about 5% of our gross income. We also donated significantly to Epsom Food Bank and also to the charity appeal that is run every year at the Vineyard National Leaders Conference. So our general aim is to give away around about 10% of the income to external charities and other causes. Clearly, because we're a UK charity, we have to make sure that we know that the money that's going out is actually well spent. So that's part of the trustee's responsibility to make sure that when we give money away, that it is actually being spent for charitable purposes by another charity. So other question is, what is We Love Epsom and Communities of Kindness? It's a good question, especially for those people who haven't been in the church very long. Some of you will remember when we were able to move outside freely, that we handed out flowers and Easter eggs in Epsom Town Centre. And that's just an example of one of the ways that we serve our community. Clearly, COVID has affected that this year, though we have helped out on some Besom projects. And we plan to do more when we can move around again. We have also donated some money to individuals who are in need as that happened. Some of you may be asking, what is gift aid? And I said that is basically money that the government gives us back for people who fill out a gift aid form. It's a refund, if you like, of the income tax that is taken from donations. So if you're a taxpayer and you fill out a gift aid, essentially the income tax that you pay boomerangs on your gift, boomerangs back to us. And it really helps when givers fill out a form. As I said, it's free money. And what I would say is, given the percentage of gift aid, it's 19% of our income, I have to say that the absolute vast majority of the givers over the last year have done that because the ideal percentage is 20%. If it goes above 20%, I'd be slightly worried. So actually, it's a really good figure. So really grateful for everybody for doing that. So if we're talking to anybody who's just started giving or planning giving, please, when you do that, please do also consider filling out a gift aid form. I should say that you can't do one if you're a non-taxpayer because that breaks the rules. So you do need to kind of check that you are actually paying tax before you fill out a gift aid form, or the church and the person involved can get into trouble. Next couple of questions. So if those people are alert and looked at how the income and expenditure have changed over the last year, you'll notice our expenditure has really gone up. So it's very good to do a comparison, and there's a very good explanation, as we talked about the church's first year being for 15 months. But only in the last few months of that first year did we really spend any significant money as the church started operations. I think this year is much more representative, with income and expenditure more closely matching each other. So what have we done this year? So this year, despite the COVID-19 restrictions, we've been able to use your generosity and our reserves built up in our first year to increase the paid hours that Duncan and Lorna work for the church. That's a deliberate strategy. Duncan and Lorna very generously offer a lot more time than we pay them for in terms of the hours they volunteer. And as you're probably aware, Duncan and Lorna also have a business called Effect Events. So they've been what's called bivocational, which means working two jobs essentially. But this year, the generous money that you've given in the first couple of years of operation has enabled Duncan and Lorna the time to produce the fantastic online services we've been blessed with, as well as increasing the time spent with people as the church grows. We've had to spend money on video and audio equipment and mixing and computers to produce those services. And it's also enabled great outreach to our community. Some weeks we've reached 300 plus people with the services on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, as I said, we've obviously saved money on venue hire this year. So we've made significant gifts to local charities in their time of needing COVID-19, and I bring Epsom Face Food Bank on this simply as a big example of the charities that have really seen the demand grow. Another question, Duncan and Lorna are trustees too. How does that work? So Vineyard churches ask for their senior pastors to be trustees of the charity. The reasons for this are complex. I'm not going to go into them here, but if you've got a question why that is, come and ask me. But I think the main thing to say about that is that any decisions that affect Duncan and Lorna, so for example, pay levels, are taken without them being present to ensure that everything is above board. And finally, if you want further information, there's a link there that you can click on to find out about the church accounts. Our registered charity is in there. Or if you go to the Charities Commission website, there's find information about a charity, you put Epsom Vineyard Church in there, it'll be there. And of course, if you've got any questions at all, the trustees' email is there. And we'd be very happy to hear from you. We don't necessarily give you an immediate answer, but hopefully, if we don't have the answer, we'll go and find out and get back to you as soon as we can. Anyway, that's all from me. I hope you haven't fallen asleep too easily. And back to Duncan.
Simon, thank you so much. That's absolutely brilliant. Simon, Mary and Brian, huge thanks for joining us here this morning. We look forward to seeing Simon and Mary at least on the Zoom later. So if anyone has got any questions, please come along, please join them and ask them after the live stream. So thank you all, guys, and we'll see you later. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Brian, Mary and Simon. So grateful.
We are.
Okay, in a moment, Duncan's going to talk to us about generosity. This is kind of family business, church family business, but we want to be transparent. So if you are visiting, we are not expecting you to give to Epsom Vineyard Church, but we would love you to hear our heart for Epsom Vineyard and the reasons why we would give financially to the church. So we'd love you to just stick around and listen. Hopefully there'll be something for you.
But let's just pray first as we open our time together. Lord, we just invite you here. We invite your presence into our homes, into the spaces we are. Lord, we thank you for your goodness. We thank you for your kindness. And Lord, may we be inspired this morning. May we hear from you. May your peace be upon us. Amen.
you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Don't be overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you gave yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't tear down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't break down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Welcome back. This morning we've already heard from our wonderful trustees about the finances of Epsom Vineyard Church. We don't talk about money regularly as church, and you know, if you're new today, I'm so sorry. Even when I talked about it last year, we taught on it mainly around the principles of how we reduce our financial anxiety and how to put good financial principles in place for ourselves, our families, and how to help our friends. And we've just finished our Everyday Supernatural series last week. So we're now just at the start of a short series on vision and generosity. The two, of course, they go hand in hand. Usually when we're generous towards the things that we're passionate about, that we love. Indeed, our finances often follow our feelings. You may have heard that before, or at least the things we really care about is ultimately what we spend our money on. For this morning's talk, I just want to thank John Wright at Trent Vineyard, who I promise you I've borrowed an awful lot of the material from. Most of the talks I've heard over the years on money, I'm really sorry, I just can't remember. They kind of have gone in one ear and out the other. But there's a few of John's talks about money that have just really stuck with me, which is why I'm borrowing his material this morning. Jesus, of course, knew the effects of money, and he talked about money a lot. But we've got to remember, it wasn't his main message. Jesus' main message was, you are loved. And we have to remember that whenever we talk about money together in a setting like this. Lorna and I have personally benefited from a lot of generosity this last year. As Simon mentioned earlier, we're bivocational, which means we run a business, but we as well as leading Epsom Vineyard. Our business, as many of you know, has been massively affected by the COVID-19 restrictions, which has meant our personal income has reduced massively too. But over this last year, we've had 6 generous financial gifts from friends and family, which have just made a huge difference to all 4 of us. We've obviously reduced our outgoings where we could over the last year, but instead of having to use our savings to fill the gap, the Lord has just provided with these generous gifts from generous givers. We haven't talked about this before on a Sunday, but for us it's been such an obvious way in which generosity has directly affected us over the course of this last year. And of course, I mentioned this not to show off, not to just say, you know, aren't we the lucky ones, or aren't we whatever. But if you sat down and thought about it, you've probably got a number of stories from your own lives about being generous or receiving generosity. And again, I've borrowed John Wright's material this morning just because he seems to be surrounded by those stories. Years ago, the Lord asked John and Debbie to give 20% of their family income, and actually Trent Vineyard's income, back to him, to things that didn't directly benefit their church as well. And eventually, the Lord asked them to just increase that to 22%. But I remember John before he even planted Trent Vineyard. And I remember him telling stories about how generosity seems to follow generous people. In fact, I was so touched by one of those stories that even as a student, a relatively poor student, I felt inspired to give away, I think it was only like £100 or something, to a friend who was a missionary at the time. It doesn't sound like a lot now, but £100 for me was a tenth of my term's money. This felt quite big, and actually I'd already given away a tenth of my student grant to the church as my tithe. So it wasn't an easy decision, and yet the Lord seemed to inspire it, so I just went with it. Within a day of making that decision, I had someone on the phone offering me work during my Easter holidays, which I think was about £700 worth of work. Now, I can't say that those things were directly linked, but the coincidence wasn't lost on me. And it felt so overwhelming at the time that I just had to thank God. It just seemed like I'd given and then was somehow given back in a huge amount of abundance. Moments of giving and generosity stay with us, like my thought from years ago. And they also shape our future habits. So before we get into this morning, let's just pause together, and can you answer this? Can you remember a time when you were either led to be generous or you received a generosity? And how did that make you feel? Welcome back. It's worth remembering too that our stories of receiving generosity over this last year are mixed in with hidden stories from within our church about faithful, regular giving. So many of you have committed financially to Epsom Vineyard since you joined us, often giving 10% of your income to the church. So if you think about this, if you've been with us for the last 3 years, we're nearly 3 years old as a church. Can you believe it? If you've been giving for that amount of time, that's about 4 months worth of your income. Now, on top of that, you might have given a little bit more to other things. I know many of you do, but just imagine what that looks like. All of this, of course, is unseen outside of the few people that help process our finances. But without that generosity, this church wouldn't function and wouldn't be what it is today. God sees your standing order. It sounds ridiculous, but he loves it. And Lorna and I just need to say up front how grateful we are, of course, too, for your generosity. So you may have a standing order that kind of rolls out of your bank account automatically, but if you just stop for a minute and consider the magnitude of that. If we had an offering basket, we never have done, but if we did, and you withdrew that amount in cash from the hole in the wall, and then you put it into the basket each week or each month. Can you imagine what that basket would look like as we passed it around as a church community? We'd probably only be able to get halfway around us all before it would be overflowing. We lose sight of it and we forget about it because it just goes out as a standing order, but the Lord sees it. And that giving, I promise you, it's incredible and it's radical. Have you ever actually talked to your friends about this? It may seem strange, but people who don't go to church and they may be saying, "How's your church funded?" And you explain, and they go, "What? So you give that?" And that's a huge percentage. And are you crazy? And they may ask questions that make you think and step back. They may ask the question, who does something like that? And of course the answer is, many of you guys do. So this morning I want to kind of ask and answer a question. What does radical generosity look like, and where ultimately does it originate? It doesn't seem natural. If our friend's reaction is anything to go by. And of course we all know we've got an inherent wish to look after ourselves, often to look after our families, sometimes to conserve our finances. But the clue I think we'll find is in the word radical. The word's often used to describe someone who's out there, who's a bit kind of extreme or extraordinary, someone on the edge. But the origin of the word is somewhat more interesting. It obviously comes from the Latin, radicalis. I've probably pronounced it wrong, but it means from the roots, not from the extremity, but from the roots. Being radical isn't out there on the extreme edge. It's the opposite. It means for us going back to our roots, or being rooted in the original source, at the absolute centre. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. So, as a little question to pose, where does radical generosity grow from? To help us answer this, we're going to go back to the roots of the Bible, back to Genesis 1, back to the creation story. So have you ever thought about creation, and maybe it was while you were watching a David Attenborough program or something like that, and you just found yourself mesmerized, astounded maybe by the extravagance of creation, its beautiful, its design, its simplicity, its art, it's amazing. And it's amazing that God created that. I've got a few pictures to show you now. This is a sea slug known as the blue dragon. Who could imagine that a slug could look so magnificent? And we find crazy creatures like this beautiful spider. Again, how stunning. Or can you even see this? This is a gecko. Its camouflage hides it perfectly. And of course, our planet, as we get out there, is full of these incredible landscapes too. From magnificent rock formations to this glacier that just moves so slowly. And then we contrast that with the Earth's hottest place. This is Ethiopia's Danakil Depression. The seawater here is heated by volcanoes, and the salt reacts with the volcanic minerals, creating these absolutely dazzling colours. So if God was that generous with his creation, and in that extravagance, he also created me and you. And more than that, he came because he wanted to have an intimate relationship with us. God is more generous than we could possibly comprehend. So from this root, from the beginnings of the Old Testament, if you like, generosity was encouraged and practiced by God's people. And normally it comes out as a response to God's generosity. In recognition that God gave them everything, his people were encouraged to tithe or give a portion of their income back to the Lord. Just a tenth, relatively small portion. And it was a token that acknowledged where it all came from. God gave, and I give it back to him. I trust him that he will continue to provide for me. God loved it, of course, when his people responded and faithfully gave their tenth. And he responded by showering blessings on them. And of course, as we read through the story in the Old Testament of the people of God, they also gave these free will offerings as well. The tenth wasn't enough sometimes for them. So God's people really grasped this invitation to be radically generous. In Exodus 36, we find this beautiful account, a little shocking if you've not read it before, the people giving to build the tabernacle, which was the forerunner to the temple. So the workmen, they received from Moses all the offerings the Israelites had brought to carry out the work of constructing the sanctuary. And the people continued to bring free will offerings morning after morning. So the workers said to Moses, the people are bringing more than enough for doing the work the Lord has commanded to be done. Then Moses gave the order, and they sent word throughout the camp, no man or woman is to make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary. And so the people were restrained from bringing more, because they already had more than was enough to do all the work. Moses had to command them to stop bringing gifts. How amazing! Because he just had too much. And that wasn't the only time. So if that was the tabernacle, when we see the people of God building the temple for the first time under King David, King David prayed this prayer around generosity. For me, who am I? And who are these my people that we should presume to be giving something to you? That's to God. Everything comes from you. All we're doing is giving back what we've been given from your generous hand. That's helpful. God, our God, all these materials, these piles of stuff for building a house of worship for you, honouring your holy name. It all came from you. It was yours in the first place. I know, dear God, that you care nothing for the surface. You want us, our true selves. These piles of stuff, as David referred to them, included tons of silver and gold, really valuable stuff. But generosity with our stuff is one thing. At the end of that passage, we read that God really wants us. And if he has us, if we're truly committed to him, our stuff, whatever it is, just comes with us. And as we turn the pages into the New Testament, we find straight away that God so loved the world that he gave his only son, Jesus. And of course, Jesus in turn voluntarily gave his life for you and me. Jesus literally lived and died by this saying, freely you have received, freely give. Radical generosity is not about having the resources that we can easily spare. It is not rooted in how much we have, rather in who has us. Shall I say that again? Generosity is not rooted in how much we have, but in who has us. As we just read in David's prayer, you want us, our true selves. The Lord wants us to choose to give ourselves unreservedly to him. And if we do that, giving generously is just a natural outworking of that. So let's just ponder again. In what ways have I given myself unreservedly to God over this last year? And in what ways would I like to give myself unreservedly to God over this next year? Welcome back. Jesus famously said, where your treasure is, where your money is, there your heart will be also. What he's saying here is we develop a heart for the things we invest in, for the things we put our money in. Suppose you buy shares, for example, in a new startup company selling artisan coffee. What happens? You somehow seem to develop an interest in coffee, in the beans, in its origins, in its roast, its flavour profiles. Or suppose you give to help children with AIDS. Next time you see an article about something similar, you'll pick it up, you'll read it. It interests you. And if you've got a standing order to your church, to this church, you know that your money's being invested in all that God is doing here. You are invested in it. And hopefully you feel so much more connected, not just to God, but to the other people that helped through this church's ministry. It becomes our church. It becomes our family together. So if you ever wished that you were more passionate about the Lord, and more passionate to see his work, to see his kingdom come, if that's you, and I've got a really simple suggestion: just keep investing in his work financially, and then just watch what happens. Simon helpfully shared earlier about Epsom Vineyard's finances in the year up to end of August 2020. And at that point, our giving, which is the lion's share of our income, it dropped a little bit from the start of the pandemic. It's since recovered. We're really grateful to the Lord and for some of you guys for that. But as a church, this last year, our ministry, how we serve and support the community and family around us, has just grown massively. We've run CAP courses online, which have reached people we've never reached before, never spoken to before, never knew about. Hundreds, literally, it sounds shocking, but hundreds of people have connected in with us via our live stream, and having the opportunity to worship with us in a COVID-safe way in their homes. We couldn't give out Easter eggs this Easter. We did that in the town centre previously. So instead of doing that, we partnered with Epsom churches together, and the hospital chaplaincy actually as well. So over Holy Week, we via the chaplaincy team gave out good quality Easter eggs to the paediatric patients during that time. What a great blessing if you've found yourself in hospital during Holy Week. And of course, we want to be faithful to the relationships God has given us. So at Christmas, we gave hampers to some of our Besom clients, and actually some of our friends from within the church that we knew would benefit from that. Now, just a little over a year ago, before the pandemic, I know most of us can't remember back that far, but as a church, we used to meet in a coffee shop, Senzo's, just in town. And on a really good Sunday, there might have been 30 of us. Last Sunday at Car Park Church, there was 53 of us there, and I think 15 or 16 of you sent your apologies or watched online. So based on that, in little over a year, we've just over doubled. And we'll talk about some of these things next week, but later today we've got, as we mentioned earlier, our first youth frisbee event. We're so excited. That has come out of, we've got 18 youth at Epsom Vineyard, or friends of our youth, who've booked for DTI, which I showed, I advertised, if you remember, a few weeks ago. So if you think back to the start of lockdown, we literally had one youth in the church at that point. And given that huge growth, we can only, it's something the Lord has done. It's not something that we're responsible for necessarily. And I just need to be honest with you, we didn't see it coming. So when I put the budget together, our whole church budget, just over a year ago, it didn't include youth. So as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking this is another opportunity for us to be generous. We were talking to some good friends about what a suitable budget would be for our youth ministry, and they reminded us youth is always a financial investment by the adults into the youth of our church. But we've got to remember it's a really exciting investment. It's a really exciting opportunity for us all. So we're just going to pause and ponder again. And this, like I said earlier, we've been going nearly 3 years ago, and I don't think I've ever made this ask. I don't think I've ever asked this question. So, and actually thinking about it, I hope I don't have to ask it regularly. But I'm asking today in response to something the Lord has already done amongst us, and it's like we need to catch up. So if you consider Epsom Vineyard to be your church family, and if you don't currently give financially, could I encourage you to ask the Lord if He wants you to start giving or committing financially to Epsom Vineyard? And if you're currently giving to Epsom Vineyard and you perhaps haven't reviewed your giving for a few years, could I just encourage you to review that with the Lord today? And if you do join in and ponder those and give those questions to the Lord and wait for His answer, whatever that answer is, can I encourage you just to be happy and joyful in that answer? If it's from the Lord, it's normally a good thing. And of course, if you started giving recently or just reviewed your giving, thank you. This probably isn't for you, but then maybe just spend the next few moments just praying about some of the exciting ministry areas you've just heard about, some of the opportunities we've got to serve and really benefit our community here. And also, before I let you ponder, I don't want any of us feeling guilted into generosity. I don't want people, if you're out there and you're already struggling financially, thinking, I might have to go into debt to actually start giving, that isn't the heart of God. I'm not asking you to do that. Please don't hear that. Just remember, whatever this is between you and the Lord. And we encourage you most weeks just to listen to the Lord, to hear His voice and respond as He asks you. So it's just another one of those, just another opportunity to listen. So let's ponder those questions together. Welcome back, and thank you. So generosity is exciting. It makes things happen around us, and it aligns our heart with God's heart. So whatever you heard this morning, whatever your takeaway is, maybe it's some of those images, maybe it's some of those challenges. Can I just encourage you to think about the blessing of generosity that we started this talk with today, either when you received it or you gave it. And we're also just going to pray for us all now, that this won't be a place of guilt or shame, but something that's freeing and a blessing to us all. So let me pray. Lord, we thank you for the gift of generosity. We thank you for the blessing of receiving generosity and being generous. And Lord, for those of us who are sat here with a slightly awkward feeling, maybe slightly guilty or just an unease, I just pray God's freedom over you right now. I pray the gift of the Holy Spirit to free you from that sense of unease. And Lord, will you continue to bless us as a church community? May our family continue to grow as people just are drawn to you. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and give you his peace. The Lord be gracious to you. The Lord's favour rest on you. And the name of the Lord be above your doorway, above your household, all the days of your life. Amen.
Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon and be gracious to you. Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you. Be gracious to you. Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. And amen, and amen, His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, he is with you. In the morning, in the evening, in your coming and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is with you, he is for 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 you. And amen, may his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, and around you and around you. He is with you, he is with you. In the morning, in the evening, in your coming and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, 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 he is for you. I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like. I've heard the tender whisper of love in the
dead of night and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. I've seen many searching for answers far and wide. I know we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to you are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love, love, love. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am.
Will I feel the warm wind blowing, melting all the sadness off of my soul, and I smell the sweet cherry blossoms, pouring all the gladness into my soul. In winter, I believe you. In springtime, I see you. It's so good to be with you. My hope has come. Lord, you make all things new. Your love is my breakthrough. Now I sing hallelujah. My hope has silver and gold. Lord, your faith has taught me to cherish that this life affliction is not my home. In winter, I believe you. In springtime, I see you. It's so good to be with you. My hope has come. Lord, you made all things new. Your love is my breakthrough. Now I sing hallelujah. My hope has found. Now I'm not gonna give in to this mortal frustration, and I'm not gonna give back any standing ovation. I will lift my soul out with no hesitation, 'cause between you and me there is no separation. There is no separation. No. You and me, there's no one in between. You and me. In winter, I believe you. In springtime, I see you.